Every single night, millions of people across the United States wake up to use the bathroom, not once, but 2, 3, sometimes even 5 times before morning. And if that sounds familiar, you already know this isn't just a small inconvenience. It's a slow kind of exhaustion that builds night after night until your mornings feel heavy, your mind feels foggy, and your energy never fully comes back. And most people are told the same simple explanation when they bring this up. They're told it's just age, or that their bladder is getting weaker, or maybe it's their prostate. So they accept it, adjust their habits, cut back on water, try supplements, and learn to live around the problem. But what if that explanation is incomplete? What if the real reason you're waking up in the middle of the night has nothing to do with your bladder at all? Because in a large number of cases, the organ people are trying to treat isn't actually the source of the problem, and until that misunderstanding is corrected, nothing they try will fully work. And that's why so many people feel stuck, doing everything they've been told, but never actually fixing what's really going on inside their body. And if you've ever found yourself lying in bed at 3 a.m., staring into the dark after another trip to the bathroom, you already know how this really feels. Because it usually starts the same way. The room is completely still. You've finally settled into a deep, comfortable sleep, and then a faint signal appears somewhere at the edge of your awareness. Not painful, not urgent at first, just enough to pull you out of rest. You try to ignore it, you turn to the other side. You tell yourself it can wait, but the pressure builds slowly, steadily, until your body forces you to respond. You sit up, your feet touch the cold floor, and you walk to the bathroom, half asleep, barely awake, just going through the motion, and when it's over, you go back to bed expecting to fall asleep again. But something has changed. Your mind is now awake. Thoughts begin to surface, things you didn't want to think about. Work, responsibilities, worries that suddenly feel louder in the silence, and minutes stretch into an hour. And just when you finally drift off again, it happens a second time, and then maybe a third. And by the time morning comes, your body feels like it never truly rested at all. And that's the part most people don't talk about, because the real damage isn't just the trips to the bathroom. It's the sleep your body never gets back. Most people have already decided what the cause is before they ever truly understand the problem. They assume it's just part of getting older, something inevitable, something everyone eventually deals with, or they blame their prostate or their bladder, or something they think is simply wearing out over time. And once that belief settles in, they stop asking deeper questions. They stop looking for a real explanation. But that belief is not entirely accurate, and in many cases, it leads people in the wrong direction. Because waking up multiple times at night to urinate is not something your body is designed to do. Not at 40, not at 50, not even at 70 when your system is functioning properly. And while there are situations where the bladder or prostate are involved, there are just as many, if not more, where the root cause lies somewhere completely different. And if you don't identify that correctly, every solution you try will only address the surface, while the real issue continues underneath. And this is exactly what I've seen over and over again in real patients. People who walk into the clinic frustrated, exhausted, and convinced they already know what's wrong. They've tried medications, supplements, diet changes, even reduced their water intake to the point where they feel dehydrated by evening. And yet nothing truly changes. Not because they aren't trying, but because they've been focusing on the wrong target. And once we step back and look at the body as a whole system, instead of isolating one organ, a very different picture begins to emerge, one that explains not only why this keeps happening, but why so many common approaches fail to fix it. To understand what's really happening, you have to shift the way you think about your body at night. Because this is not just a bladder issue. It's a fluid distribution issue, and it begins long before you ever go to bed. All throughout the day while you're standing, sitting, walking, gravity is constantly pulling fluid downward through your body. And a portion of that fluid slowly accumulates in your lower extremities, especially your legs. You may not notice it clearly, but it's there. Sometimes it shows up as a slight tightness in your socks, a faint indentation in your skin, or a feeling of heaviness in your calves by the end of the day. And while you're upright, your body tolerates this. Your circulation adjusts. Your kidneys filter what's in your bloodstream. but the fluid that has seeped into your tissues is essentially out of sight from that system. Now everything changes the moment you lie down, because gravity is no longer pulling that fluid downward. Your legs are now level with your heart, and that stored fluid begins to move back into circulation. It re-enters your bloodstream relatively quickly, increasing your total blood volume, and your heart detects that change immediately. It senses that the system is now carrying more fluid than it needs, so it responds by releasing a signal, a hormone that tells your kidneys to start removing the excess. And your kidneys obey. They increase filtration. They produce more urine, and within a relatively short period of time, your bladder fills, not because you drank too much water at night, but because your body is actively clearing fluid that had been accumulating for hours. And that process doesn't happen just once. It continues in waves as more fluid returns from your tissues, which is why you may wake up multiple times, each time with a surprisingly full bladder. And once you see it this way, the pattern starts to make sense, but it also becomes clear that not all nighttime urination is the same. Because broadly speaking, there are 3 different patterns people fall into. The first is when you produce large amounts of urine throughout the entire day and night, which can be related to high fluid intake or metabolic conditions like diabetes. The second, and the most common in this context, is when daytime urination is relatively normal, but nighttime urine production increases significantly, often with larger volumes each time. And that's the pattern most closely linked to fluid redistribution. And the third is when the urge is frequent, but the volume is very small, where you feel like you constantly need to go, but very little comes out. And that type is usually more directly related to bladder sensitivity or structural issues. And understanding which pattern you fall into is critical, because each one points to a completely different underlying cause, and treating them all the same is one of the main reasons people stay stuck without real improvement. There was a man in his mid-50s who came in after months of broken sleep, the kind of exhaustion that doesn't show up all at once but slowly wears you down until even simple days feel heavy. He told me he was getting up 4, sometimes 5 times a night, and he was convinced it had to be his prostate. He had already tried supplements, reduced his evening fluids, even changed his diet, but nothing made a real difference. And what stood out wasn't just the number of times he was waking up, it was the volume each time. It wasn't a few drops. It was a full bladder, again and again. So instead of focusing only on his urinary system, I asked him a different set of questions, whether he felt short of breath climbing stairs, whether his legs felt heavy at the end of the day, whether his socks left marks on his skin, and slowly the picture became clearer. His bladder wasn't the problem. His body was holding fluid during the day and releasing it at night. And once we addressed that pattern, not just with small changes in routine, but with awareness of how his body was actually functioning, his nights began to stabilize. And that's why it's important for you to pause and look at your own situation more closely, because there are simple ways to check whether this same mechanism may be affecting you. One of them is to press gently but firmly on the front of your lower leg, along the shin, for about 10 to 15 seconds, and then release. If the skin immediately returns to normal, fluid buildup is unlikely. But if a small indentation remains for a few seconds, that can be a sign of retained fluid in the tissue. Another approach is to pay attention to your urine pattern over a full day, not just how often you go, but how much, and specifically how much of that output happens at night. Because if a significant portion of your total daily urine is being produced during nighttime hours, that's a strong indication that your body is shifting its fluid balance in a way that's disrupting your sleep, and recognizing that pattern is often the first step toward correcting it. What you eat and drink, especially in the evening, plays a much bigger role in this process than most people realize. And it's often not the obvious things that cause the problem. It's the hidden patterns. Excess sodium is one of the most common contributors, not just from adding salt at the table, but from processed foods like cheese, deli meats, sauces, and packaged meals, because sodium causes your body to retain fluid during the day and then release it later when your kidneys begin clearing it, which often happens at night. And a similar pattern can occur with sugar, particularly in the evening, where fluctuations in blood sugar and insulin can influence how your body holds and releases fluid. And alcohol, even in small amounts, can interfere with the normal hormonal signals that help your body reduce urine production during sleep, making nighttime urination more likely. And while there are foods that can support overall urinary health, like fiber-rich vegetables, unsweetened cranberry, or foods that provide minerals such as magnesium, it's important to see them as supportive, not as a cure, because the real change comes from correcting the underlying pattern rather than relying on a single ingredient. And that brings us to what you can actually do starting tonight, because the goal is not to stop your body from producing urine, but to help it do that at the right time. One of the simplest and most effective steps is to shift your fluid intake earlier in the day, so that most of what you drink happens before late afternoon, while still staying adequately hydrated. And in the evening, about an hour before bed, you can lie down and elevate your legs slightly above the level of your heart for 15 to 20 minutes, allowing that stored fluid to return to circulation while you are still awake, so your body can process it before you go to sleep. And when you feel the need to urinate afterward, you're effectively clearing what would have woken you later in the night. And alongside that, keeping your evening meals lighter in sodium, limiting alcohol, and maintaining gentle daily movement to support circulation can make a meaningful difference over time. Because your body is not working against you, it's responding to signals. And once those signals are better aligned, your nights can become quieter again. Not by forcing the system, but by working with it in a way that supports how it was designed to function.